Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday. It is the 13th of December, and we are in the midst of Chanukah. So even though it's going to be Parshas Miketz coming up, we're going to focus on matters that have to do with Chanukah today, because I think that's where our minds are at. We're also going to dedicate our learning today. It should be a protection for all of our brothers and sisters in Israel who are in harm's way. Of course, it includes the captives and hostages. They should be returned safely to their families in good health as soon as possible. It also includes all the brave Chayalim who are out there, who are working so hard to keep Am Yisrael safe. They should succeed in their mission, and they should also return to their families safely. And of course, we're also thinking about all of our brothers and sisters in Israel, wherever they may find themselves in harm's way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just like we say that he did his nisim, he did his miracles, in days of yore, at this time, specifically the time of the year, we should experience that all in a big way again, speedily in our days. I want to share some sources with you that deal with Chanukah that I think are going to be quite apropos to where Am Yisrael finds itself at this juncture in history. So let's take a look. We're going to see something in Halacha, in Hilchas Chanukah. You have in front of you a page from the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah. I'm going to be looking at, I don't know if you see the cursor moving on the screen or not, but let's look at Sif Aleph in the Shulchan Aruch here. It's Taf Resh Ayin Gimel. That is 773, section 773 in Orach Chaim and Shulchan Aruch. He says, Kol hashmanim v'hapsilos, all oils and all wicks, no matter what they are made of, sherim l'ner Chanukah. Unlike when it comes to Shabbos, we always read on Friday night the chapter of Bameh Barlikin. There's very specific rules when it comes to Shabbos, which oils and which type of wicks a person should be using in their home for Shabbos. When it comes to Ner Chanukah, the lamps that need to be lit in for Chanukah, all oils and all wicks are fine. Even if those oils don't get, here's a sheet for you, even though those oils don't get sucked up by those wicks as best as they might, if they were oil and good cotton wicks, it all still works for Chanukah. Even if the flame don't work so well with those wicks, it's all kosher. Someone fulfills their obligation with that when it comes to Chanukah. And then we'll just end with the Ramah. The Ramah says, nonetheless, shemen zayis mitzvah min hamuvchar. If someone has a choice of what type of oil to use on Chanukah, it's best to use the oil of shemen zayis, the oil of an olive, because that's where the miracle, we want to resemble the miracle that occurred on Chanukah. That's what the Shulchan Aruch tells us. Let's go down in that page. You'll see the Mishnah Berurah that's written by the Chafetz Chaim, his commentary. So that's what you'll see on the bottom of page 1. The section that's on the bottom is called the Mishnah Berurah. If you look in the left-hand column, second line from the top, there's a beis in parentheses. And we're going to read there what the Chafetz Chaim wrote, commenting on this din in the Shulchan Aruch. And again, this is in the Mishnah Berurah there. So it's by the beis in parentheses. It says, Ksherim l'ner Chanukah, all oils and all wicks are okay. They can be used and someone fulfills their obligation when it comes to Chanukah. So he writes as follows, Mikol makom, nonetheless, mitzvah min hamuvchar likach lepsilat semer gefen ochute pishtan. Even though all wicks are good, the best wick is to use semer gefen, that's a way of saying cotton, ochute pishtan, or flax, because those will make for the best wicks. Those make for drawing the oil and having a good flame. Next sentence. Shuman shel chelev ha-ne'asar mi-basar v'chalav. So he's, Shuman o chelev. Let's say someone has fat. Back in the day, they would make candles from fat, or they might use some type of fats. Ha-ne'asar mi-basar v'chalav. Or let's say it was some type of milk product, dairy product, that was problematic of basar v'chalav. Now, what's the issue? Chelev, if you have the forbidden fats from a cow, the ones that we're not allowed to consume, not only can't we consume them, we can't get any benefit from them. Same thing with mixtures that are basar v'chalav. If I have a milk and meat mixture, not only am I not allowed to eat it, I'm not allowed to get benefit for them. So let's say I've got some congealed fats that I made candles from, that are either forbidden fats or they were basar b'chalav. They were milk and dairy mixtures that I'm not allowed to get benefit from. What happens to that when it comes to Chanukah? So he says, Shuman ochelav aneser basar b'chalav asur la'alik mimenu ner Chanukah. Those cannot be used. Why? Because again, even though the Shulchan Aruch said I can use all oil and all wick, that means permissible oils. But if I have something which I'm not allowed to get hana, I'm not allowed to get benefit from, that I cannot use for my ner Chanukah. I can't also intentionally say I'm going to nullify them in a proportion of 60. Why? Because we have a concept. I'm not allowed to nullify something intentionally. If it happens, then there's room to ground to figure out, okay, well, what was the proportions? Could I nullify it? But I can't do that intentionally. Next sentence. So this is the way most of us accustomed, because we're not broke, that we light on the first night, we light one lamp, and the next night 2, and then 3, then 4, and last night we lit 6. In other words, whatever I'm going to have in my next cup should be similar to what was in the previous cups, meaning whatever fuel, in other words, if I'm going to use olive oil in one cup, I shouldn't have olive oil in one, and then canola oil in another, and then some other oil in a third, because I want to have some uniformity. I want to have that all the flames are burning with the same degree of quality. So if I'm using multiple flames in my menorah, I want to have that all the fuels are the same. There were some families that had the custom that to light one lamp. Each member of the household lights just one lamp. In other words, they didn't have, each one has their own Chanukah with 6 lamps in it. Just everyone lights one lamp. So since each one's lighting one and they're independent, then you could have different fuels in each one, because you don't have that issue. You don't have that issue with the uniformity. So that's what he says there. He says, those people whose custom is that each member of the house lights one flame. So one guy could have a flame that is fed by oil. The next one could have a candle, a wax flame. Fine. All right. That's all nice. I wanted to get to this last sentence because that's the main part I want to focus on. Last sentence. Shemen hagazol. Let's say I have stolen oil. I went to my friend's house and I stole some olive oil from the cupboard. Saruch iyun, that requires some investigation. Ikasher l'ner Chanukah, whether or not I could fulfill my mitzvah of ner Chanukah with stolen oil. Now, I saw that and I'm shocked. I was like, what's the shaila? When it comes to sukkahs, we all know that a sukkah hagzula, if I steal someone's sukkah, if I steal someone's esrog, I steal someone's lulav, I'm not going to fulfill my mitzvah. There's a concept of mitzvah b'min avera. So what's different about ner Chanukah? Why should it be tzarech iyun? Well, that requires investigation. Why should that require any investigation whatsoever? So the Mishnah Berurah tells you the source to look at. He says, it's called Tshuvos Shoel Umeshiv. This was written by the great Rabbi Yosef Shaul Nathan's son. Rabbi Yosef Shaul Nathan's son was a rabbi in the 1800s, one of the leading rabbis in Poland in the 1800s. So he says, Chelak Echad, look in the first volume of Madurat Lissa in his 3rd edition, and he tells you where to look. We're going to do that. So we're going to flip to the next page, flipping to page 2. And again, I want to understand what's the shiloh. He told you, the Mishnah Berurah says, it's a tzarech iyun. It requires investigation whether or not someone fulfills their mitzvah of lighting ner Chanukah if they use stolen oil. Why should it even be a question in the first place? So when we go, I'm sorry, it's a little hazy. I don't know why when I copied it off the computer, it came a little hazy. So we're going to speak it out outside. So what is Rav Yosef Shaul Nathan's son? How does he want to explain why there's a shaila? Why is it a tzarech iyun? Why does it matter? Why does it require further investigation? Obviously, if someone wants to fulfill ner Chanukah, it's best, it's optimal. Nobody should be stealing and nobody should be using stolen oil. So, but he's writing there, if it somehow happens, it's tzarech iyun. It's not so simple that someone didn't fulfill their obligation. It's not so simple they did fulfill their obligation. What's the question? So the way Rav Nathan's son explains it is as follows. He says there's generally a concept that if someone steals something, of course there's a prohibition against stealing, and they'll have to answer to Hashem for stealing. Now, if they significantly change that product, in other words, let's say someone stole wheat and then they ground it up and made it into flour, there's a concept that they were kone b'shinoi, that they acquired it by making that significant change. That in no way absolves them of theft. They are obligated to pay back and pay restitution for what they stole, but the question is, do they own those goods now? So there's a concept that if someone made a significant change to something, then it could be kone b'shinoi. They could acquire it by making that significant change. So what Rav Nathanson questions here is as follows. When it comes to Chanukah, there's an interesting halacha, a very unique halacha. The oil that I spill into my Chanukah is now usher. It cannot be used for anything else. Meaning, if I have leftover oil in my Chanukah, I have leftover oil in my menorah after Chanukah, I can't just spill out that oil and use it for salad dressing. Once it has been set aside for mitzvah purpose of Chanukah, it is now usher to be used for anything else. So Rav Nathanson wants to suggest that if someone steals oil, that's usher, that's obviously forbidden, and they'll have to answer to Hashem for stealing it. But if they now take that stolen oil and spill it into their menorah, that oil is now usher, it's now forbidden to be used for anything other than their Chanukah. That's a very significant change that I've just made to that oil, because now it's usher behana. It's usher, it cannot be used for any other benefit. I can't use it for salad dressing. I can't use it to whatever else I would want to use that olive oil for. So his question is, maybe now that someone has put that in their menorah and it's usher bahana, so that's a significant enough change. Now it's not considered stolen oil, and maybe a person could fulfill their mitzvah with it. Again, that does not absolve them from theft. It doesn't absolve them from paying restitution. They would have to pay back what they stole. That's definitely the case. However, what it does say is that's his question, is that maybe that's a significant enough change, so now someone could fulfill their mitzvah on Chanukah with that stolen oil. So that's his question, that maybe it's different than stealing a lulav. I stole a lulav, it's not different than it was a minute ago. I stole an esrog, it's not different than it was a minute ago. I stole schach, it's not different than it was a minute. I stole sukkah, it's not different than it was a minute ago. And that's why I can't fulfill my mitzvah of lulav, esrog, schach, sukkah, if the goods were stolen, because it's stolen goods, and I can't do a mitzvah with stolen goods. But here he's wondering, when it comes to oil, since when I put it in my menorah, it's now asr ba'ana, it becomes forbidden to get any benefit from it. That's a very significant change. And since you've got a significant change, so maybe now that's something that someone could fulfill their mitzvah on Chanukah with. That's the question that the Sholem Meshav has. And that's why the Chafetz Chaim wrote in his Mishnah Berurah that when it comes to stolen oil, he says it's questionable. Tzarich iyun, it requires further investigation whether or not someone could fulfill their mitzvah with it. And that's why, of course, it's best not to use stolen oil. First of all, none of us should ever be stealing. But if, let's say, stolen oil was available, even though there's a question of maybe that someone could fulfill their mitzvah with it, it's better to avoid that. It's best to avoid that and not use it. Don't get oneself into the question. Okay, I see this and I say, even though the Chafetz Chaim wrote Tzarich iyun, of course he would say, stay away from it. If you would ask anybody about stolen oil, using stolen oil on Chanukah to fulfill a mitzvah, everyone would say stay away. Even Rav Nathanson would say stay away for it. He's just raising the question that there might be some grounds to say you can do a mitzvah with it, but he would never tell you that's the optimal thing to do, which made me do a double take when I saw a news item last week. So we're at the bottom of page 2. One of the leading rabbis in Israel is a man by the name of Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein. Rav Zilberstein is the Rav in a neighborhood outside of Bnei Brak, and he's also a son-in-law of the famous late great posek in Israel, Rav Elyashiv. So Rav Zilberstein is often asked contemporary halacha questions, and his response is always interesting. And here's a news item that I saw reported in 2 places last week. We're first going to look at this one. This is taken from the Jewish news website Matzav. So here it is: menorah lighting in a tank. So here's the question. Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein said, there was a shir, and someone was reporting what went on in a shir. Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein said that a soldier asks him whether he could take oil for Chanukah lighting from his tank's engine if nothing else were available. So you hear what's going on? This soldier is in Gaza. wants to fulfill the mitzvah of menorah. However, he's got no access. It's not like he could just go to his Judaica store and buy a thing of oil. He can't go to the Kroger and buy some olive oil. Where's he going to get oil from? He's in the middle of fighting in Gaza, so he could drain some oil, some diesel oil, whatever it is, from the tank, put a wick together, and he could light menorah. So he's asking Rav Zilberstein, is that okay? So my first sign when I see that is, that's gezela, that's stealing. And the answer would be no. That's the case that the Mishnah Berurah said is tzarachiyah. Don't do it. Even though Rav Nachmanson posits whether or not it might be okay, no one's going to say this is optimal. It's tzarachiyah, so don't do it. That's what I would have guessed. So again, back to the article. So he wanted to take oil from his tank's engine if nothing else were available, or whether this would be considered stealing army property. So he says, no doubt you can do it, Rav Zilberstein responded. Why? Because one is taking enough oil for one candle. In other words, he's taking the bare minimum to fulfill the obligation and needs no more than that, which is worth a few cents. And the army wants you to have the power and privilege of a Chanukah candle, which is surely acceptable for them. So what he's saying is as follows. He's saying it's not stolen because the Israeli army it's an army of Yehudim, of Jews. And the government knows the morale boost that this will give to their soldiers to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah. So it's worth just a couple prutas. It's worth a couple cents, the bare minimum of oil that's going to be taken. And it's not stolen. Why? Because he says it's certain that they would agree for a soldier to make use of this bare minimum amount to fulfill the mitzvah, because they know the morale boost, and this will give the person spiritual strength and give them zechuyos, merits. So it's not stolen. They would want you to take it. He says, I can say that with certainty. What a beautiful thing. He says, this is a Jewish state. It's a Jewish army. They would want their soldiers to fulfill the mitzvah. No doubt it's not considered guzzle. It's not considered stolen. Okay, beautiful. Next paragraph. Rav Zilberstein added that he once asked his father-in-law, Rav Elyashiv, whether soldiers spending the night in a tank, eating and sleeping there, could light Chanukah candles at the tank's entrance, meaning that's kind of their home. That's their apartment. It's a very small one, but that's what they're living in. So does that consider their bias? The mitzvah of Chanukah is ner ishu beso. So he was asking his father-in-law, Rav Elyashiv, if you have a tankist, you have someone who's assigned to a tank, and that's where they're going to be spending the night, that's their living quarters, could they light their menorah there and fulfill their obligation? Rav Elyashiv said this was impossible because a tank does not have the status of a home. The whole mitzvah of menorah is ner ishu beso. So he said, Rav Elyashiv said that again, you can't do it by the tank. Instead, it says the soldier should rely on his wife or a shaliach lighting for him at his home. So it would seem the case that Rav Zilberstein was talking about, what he was telling this guy, drain a little bit of oil from the engine. Okay, that would be all right, but maybe in your encampment, that's where you would light. But if someone was in a tank, you would say that's not the place to light. That's not considered beso. A person has to light menorah at a place that has the status of beso, their living quarters. And he was saying that Rav Elyashiv, for some reason, held that a tank does not assume that status. Now, I want to show you that this is actually a machlokas. We're going to see that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, great halachic authority, was a contemporary of Rav Elyashiv for many years. He argued, and Rav Shlomo Zalman clearly held that a tankist, someone who is stationed to a tank and living in that tank does assume the status of beso, and he could fulfill their obligation. Just got to be very careful about lighting flames near a tank. But you got to, here, I'll show you where I found this. So you'll see there, the next source that we have on page 3 is the Halicha Shlomo. So here's something, the teachings and rulings of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. His Talmidim, his students, and his family members put this together after he passed away. So he says here, Hanosea ba'aviron, someone is traveling in an airplane. Ve'en madlikin olav ner Chanukah b'beisa. And he was not, his family, let's say his whole family's on the plane, so his family's not home lighting menorah. And he does not have a shaliach. That would be the best thing, to have a shaliach go into the house, have an agent go into the house. I offered to do this for someone who didn't think he was going to be home one night. This year, Chanukah, thank God they were home. It all worked out. But if someone is not going to be home, in this case, they thought they were going to be in the hospital. It didn't happen. They were home, so they didn't need my services. But it's happened before. I've gone to people's houses and acted as their agent to light menorah. So he says that's the best thing. But let's say someone's traveling by plane. Let's say the whole family's on a plane and nobody has access to their house. So there's no one going to light in the house. So he wants to know, what does this fellow do? He's flying on a plane. No one is home lighting. Yadlik Sham ala Shulchan. So he's saying in the hotel, I'm sorry, in the airplane, not hotel, in the airplane, he should light on the table. But don't make a bracha there. In other words, it's not the optimal place. It's questionable if that has the status of beso. Someone's on the plane. Does that really have the status of beso? Okay, you could catch a nap on the plane, but is that really a place where someone sleeps? Are you going to call it? It's similar to a hotel room. So he says they should light there, but don't make a bracha. Now, obviously, back in the day when smoking was allowed on planes and people had cigarette lighters and matches, maybe you could imagine this, but still, for the life of me, I cannot imagine, even when smoking was allowed on a plane, I cannot imagine stewardesses would have been okay with someone setting up a little menorah on their tray. And so, as you'll see in the footnotes here, I think it's clear that he was not talking about a candle. You'll see what he's going to be talking about, but he is not in any way advocating. No one should think they've got some kind of religious right to be bringing matches, cigarette lighters, and candles onto a plane and claiming that Rosh Shlomo Zalman, is going to let you get away with that. Let's look at the footnotes there. So he says Rishimos, these are notes, and he says, okay, V'dafka Benito Didan, this is specifically in our kind of a case. Let's say someone was a full-blown guest in someone's house. V'af be tank. Even in a tank. This is the case that Rosh Shlomo Zalman was asked about. Let's say someone was staying over. They were assigned to their tank, and that's where they're going to be sleeping. That's where they're going to be. Afilu darsham rakbos alayla. Even if they're only in the tank for one night, madlik bibracha. They light there with the bracha. So contrast that to what Rav Zilberstein reported from Rav Elyashiv, that he claimed that Rav Elyashiv said that a tank does not assume the status of a bias, therefore someone should not light there. Rosh Shlomo Zalman differed, and Rosh Shlomo Zalman said, yeah, a tank does become a bias, and someone should light there with a bracha. Okay, fine. And anyone who's going to be in a hotel for one night, that's your place. This tank's your place. They use a bracha. Fine. If let's say they will not let him light an actual flame, they won't. It's in a tank. There's a lot of flammable stuff around there that can be somewhat dangerous. Or in the case of the plane, they're not going to let him light a real flame. So what do you do? Kavishu b'derech klal, and that's the usual way. They're not going to want someone in a tank lighting flames. They're not going to want someone on a plane lighting flames. What then? Yadlik pinas kiss. They should light a pocket flashlight, a battery-powered flashlight. Shieshbo kidei lidlo chatzi shah. It's got enough juice in it. It's got enough battery power that it can last for a half hour. Stand it up. Do something with it. Position it on a table. Stand it up. That it shows it's being done l'shem mitzvah, and that should be done below bracha. In other words, if you're doing it that way, we're not lighting a real flame, then it should be done without a bracha. So that's what we would tell, and that's what we do tell anyone who finds themselves in a situation where they will not let them light. So, for example, someone's in a hospital, so use an electric menorah, but again, don't recite a bracha. That's not being done the way Chazal had intended it. So, but what we see here is that there must have been a machlokas between Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rav Elyashiv about the status of a tank. Soldiers assigned to a tank, and they're going to be there. They're going to be sleeping. They're going to be living there. Does that take on the status of beso, of a house, that therefore someone would light menorah there? Rav Shlomo Zalman said yes. If it's a real flame, they would even make a bracha. If it's not a real flame, it's just battery powered, a flashlight. Do it for the mitzvah, but don't make the bracha. I'll tell you, Leila and I had this last year. We were flying to Israel to visit my parents on Chanukah, during Chanukah, and there was one night, obviously, we couldn't light menorah because there's no way to have it if you fly to Israel on Chanukah. So what did we do? We asked the shaliach, Hirsch Sherman, God bless him. He was willing. We gave him the keys to our house. We set up our menorah. He went into our house, and he was our agent. He lit menorah in our house. He lit our rukiah. He stayed there for a half hour. He brought some work, or he brought a book, something to read. And after the half hour, he blew out our menorah. So he was our agent for Chanukah that night. what did I do? I said, Hirsch is going to be Hirsch is going to be lighting our menorah in our house as our agent. So I said, you know what? Maybe we should have something on the airplane, even though we're not going to fulfill our mitzvah, but just some way to have a zecher, some memory that it's Chanukah. I brought a pocket flashlight with me, and I was going to do this, what Rav Shlomo Zalman said. I wasn't going to make a bracha, but I brought a pocket flashlight. I would set it up on my table or in that little seat pocket in front of me, just stand it upright. And I thought, okay, I'll turn it on for a half hour, and that way I'll some zecher that it's Chanukah. Just to before I tell you what happened. So I spoke to a posek. I spoke to Rav Shmuel first in Chicago, and I told this to him, and he told me, he goes, it's totally not necessary. You have a shaliach going to your house. You fulfilled your mitzvah that way. I said, yeah, 100%. But I said, but should I also do this? He says, no, you don't have to. You did what you need to do. You had a shaliach in your house. He says, first of all, he goes, you shouldn't have made a ticket to go during Chanukah. He goes, to miss out this way. I said, but that's the only time. Okay, that's the only time you can get away. That's what you had to do. But he goes, if that's the only time, that's what you did. What you got to do. But you have a shaliach going to your house. You fulfilled it that way. So I said, should I also bring the flashes? He goes, there's no reason. I said, it'll just give the flavor. He goes, okay, you want to give the flavor of Chanukah, that's fine, but you fulfilled your chiyuv, you fulfilled your obligation. You have the shaliach in your house light, that's fine, so that's it. If I couldn't have a shaliach, that's what Rav Shlomo Zalman is talking about. Then the best thing that I could do to still have some feel of Chanukah is to have a pocket flashlight going for a half hour, and I wouldn't make a bracha on it. So let's say if a tankist, you got someone who is with the tank, so again, it sounds like Rav Elyashiv is going to say, if let's say the guy does have access to real flames, he could set it up right outside the tank door, and that's not a danger. The commander won't mind. Set it up outside the door. Rav Shlomo Zalman would say, absolutely make a bracha. Rav Elyashiv would say, no, you don't make a bracha. That for his reason, whatever it was, he said it's not considered base, so it's not considered a house. Rav Shlomo Zalman says, it is. If you can't use flames, best you could do is a flashlight, but again, don't make a bracha. There we go. Okay. And by the way, again, on a plane, don't ever try lighting a flame. You'll get the air marshals after you. You'll probably get grounded for life and not allowed back on a plane. So just use the flashlight trick. But again, as what I did, Layla and I did last year, have a shaliach, have an agent set up in your house a menorah, and have an agent go over the light. That's how to take care of one's chiyuv. I want to go on to the next thing, though, that Rabbi Zilberstein said. Rabbi Zilberstein, after addressing this question about taking oil from the tank, and whether or not that was considered theft. So I saw on another website, this one called the Yeshiva World, so they brought this down, and then they added more. I guess Zilberstein had spoken more at greater length about this at his shir, and that's what you'll see here at the bottom of page 3. However, after addressing the Shiloh, the question of whether the soldier can use oil from the IDF tank, Rav Zilberstein then surprised his listeners by poskening that IDF soldiers cannot light Chanukah candles in Gaza. The truth is that it seems someone who's in Gaza at a time when terrorists could crawl out of tunnels on them at any moment is exempt from Ner Chanukah. It's not considered a home, even if he sleeps there. In other words, the person is got to be on guard, even if someone catches a couple minutes here and there. That's not a bias. A house means a place where I can relax. I don't have to constantly be on guard. Someone who's in an active combat zone, that's not considered base. So even if he catches a cat nap every now and then, he's got to be constantly in a state of vigilance. That's not a bias. That's not a house. It's not considered a home, even if he sleeps there. I told him that I think he doesn't fulfill his obligation by lighting in Gaza. Only his wife or a shaliach at home can light for him. He can't light there. He wouldn't fulfill his obligation. He's in a situation of war, Rav Zilberstein explained. He doesn't have the yishuv adas, the peace of mind to light there, as he's on edge there and frightened. Every moment there's sakanos nafashos, there's mortal danger. The terrorists crawl there underground. They're evil animals. In my humble opinion, it's a difficult shayla if you can light in a room in Gaza. There's even if, let's say, they took over a building, and there's some respite that they have no idea if someone's going to pop out of a tunnel shaft or anything like that. So he says, Ner Chanukah is lit in order to thank and praise Hashem, and someone in Gaza is not in a situation of thanking and praising, but is in a situation of danger, of asking for rachamim, for mercy, that he and his friends remain alive. If he wants, he can light without a bracha, but lighting with the bracha is not allowed since he's in a makom sakana. So this is what he's saying. It was quite surprising. Last paragraph, Rav Zilberstein concluded his words by saying that we should take advantage of this time since it's a time of Nisim, meaning Chanukah is a time, it's a historical time of miracles, and many Nisim can happen. We fully believe that the miracles of Chanukah were not limited to Chanukah of thousands of years ago, the days of the Maccabim, but this has been designated a time of Nisim, of miracles, and they could happen again today. And it's explained in the poskim. He says that the commentaries explain that during Chanukah, it's permitted to daven for open miracles. The rest of the year, we don't daven for open miracles. But during Chanukah, we can. Just like our ancestors were Zocha, they merited Nisim, miracles in those days. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, can perform Nisim and wonders for us during these days. So someone might look at that last paragraph and say, what's a source? What's a makor? What's a source for that? So I want to share a source of that with you. I shared some of this in Shul this past Shabbos. I was so happy. A friend of mine had referred me to this source, and I want to share it again today. It made such an impression on me. Even though I spoke this out on Shabbos, I want to speak it out again. It made such an impression on me. So we're in the Shulchan Aruch. We're on page 4. And we're in the Shulchan Aruch, and this is in the second volume of the Mishnah Berurah. So it's Siman Kuf Pei Zayin. Kuf Pei Zayin, that's 187, section 187, and it's the last Ramah we're going to see. So this is the section of Shulchan Aruch where he's talking about benching, the Birchas Hamazon, the grace after meals. And we know that during Chanukah, we insert Al Hanisim. Al Hanisim is inserted after the second paragraph of Nodeh. So after Nodeh Lecha, we insert the paragraph of Al Hanisim. It's very easy to forget that. If someone's running on autopilot and they're just benching by rote, it's very easy to forget and to and just to buzz right on and forget Al Hanisim. If one does that, what do? Is there another point in benching where it can be inserted? So let's look at that last Ramah. So on page 4 in the Shulchan Aruch, it's to Sif Daled there. The Ramah says it then, and it's you see where the font is a little bit different. It says Hagah. Vomrim Al Hanisim b'Chanukah Purim. On both Chanukah and Purim, we say Al Hanisim Kodem v'Al Hakol, before the third paragraph of Al Hakol. V'im lo amru, if someone forgot to recite it, ein machziro, so they do not have to repeat benching. Meaning, I finished benching. Oh no, I forgot Al Hanisim. He says it's not like Yal v'Yavo, it's not like Ritzei. I don't have to repeat the benching. And he tells you, look later in Tafresh Pei Beis, Mikol Makom, nonetheless, Yuchal lo amru. There is a makeup spot. A person can still, if I forgot to recite Al Hanisim in its proper place, there is another place in the benching where I can insert it. Yachal Omro Besoch Shar Harachaman. By the rest of the Harachamans, that section after the Bamarom, where I'm going to be saying the other Harachamans, there's a way to insert it. V'yomer, I say a special Harachaman, and you'll find this printed in many benchers. It says, Harachamanu Yasa Lanu Nisim. God, you're so merciful. Please perform miracles for us. Just like you did in those days of yore, Bisman Hazeh, at this time of the year. And this is the custom. And you'll find this in many benchers. Many benchers have it after Bamarom. You'll see one of the Harachamans there is set up telling you that if you forgot to recite Al Hanisim, here's a chance. Recite this Harachaman, and then you can insert the Al Hanisim. That's what you'll find in many, many benchers. I was using a bencher this morning, did not have that. I was making a point of telling this, the high school boys from my shir were in the school. They were over at our house for breakfast this morning for Chanukah. And I made a point of telling this, and the bencher that I had passed out, the NCSY bencher, actually did not have this harachman in there, but most benchers do have this in there. But I told him, you'll have to take my word for it. This harachman exists. So that's what you'll find. Now, many of our commentators are bothered by the following question. And I have there, you'll see one of them is the Sharei Tshuva. That's right there. It's in the Shulchan Aruch. You're bothered by the following question. Ordinarily speaking, we do not daven for open miracles. We believe that after God finished creating our world, we don't have open miracles. God operates within the laws of nature. We don't daven for God to perform an open miracle and change the laws of nature. He just doesn't operate that way anymore now that the world has been set into motion. If that's the case, where do we get off? Just because I forgot Al Hanisim, where do I get off saying, Harachaman, God, you're so merciful, Huyasa lanu nisim, you should perform open miracles for us, just like you did in those days of yore at this time of the year. Where do I have the chutzpah to ask for this? Ordinarily speaking, we don't daven for open miracles. Why here? Why on Chanukah? Why would it be okay? That's a question. And the Shari Tshuva is bothered by this, and he proposes an answer. He says, well, I'm saying it in the plural. I'm saying he should do miracles for us, for Am Yisrael. Maybe if I ask for it in the plural, it's okay. All right, some of the other commentators don't like that. So a friend of mine last week showed me a beautiful pshat, a beautiful idea from Rabbi Menachem Auerbach. I have it there on the bottom of page 4. I found this on JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, in 1930. Here's the death notice they printed. Rabbi Menachem Auerbach, he was a relative. He was somehow related to the famous Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach passed away in the 1990s. So this relative is obviously much older than him because he passed away in 1930 at a ripe old age. Not too old, but look at the circumstances of his death. It says Rabbi Menachem Auerbach, a prominent Jewish religious leader, and this is in 1930, died today at the age of 70. His death followed an attack brought on by eating poisoned fish. So again, this obviously was a time before there was modern day refrigeration. And obviously, I guess that fish had sat out too long. It seems like it was a bad case of food poisoning. And he had eaten some fish and gave him a bad case of food poisoning and a day before antibiotics. And many of the other medical marvels that we take for granted. Sad. Here was this great Talmud Chacham in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and those are the circumstances of his death. Terrible. You think about this, like who dies from food poisoning nowadays? You know, there's so many things that are out there. 1930, bad fish could kill you. And apparently that's how Rabbi Menachem Auerbach met his end. But Rabbi Menachem Auerbach led a very productive life. And some of the Sfarim he left behind was a set of commentary to the Shulchan Aruch called Orech Ne'eman. And we're going to see here what he writes on this Ramah. Again, the Ramah told us that during Chanukah, if I forgot to recite Al Hanisim in its proper place, I could say that special Harachman asking for miracles after Bamarom, and then cite the Al Hanisim. I would go right into Bimei Matisyahu. In other words, Al Hanisim is that introductory paragraph, and then we go Bimei Matisyahu. So if I forgot Al Hanisim in a proper place, I continue with benching. After Bamaram, I'll say that Harachaman, God, you did miracles for us in days of yore at this time of the year, do miracles for us again. And then I say, Bimei Matisyahu, I say that whole paragraph. So again, the question is, but we don't daven, we don't ask God for open miracles. How do I do this on Chanukah? So let's look at what Rav Auerbach says. He quotes the Ramah. Ramah, Arachmanu Yasalanu Nisim. He says that if I forgot to recite Al Nisim in its proper place, after Bamarom, I recite this Harachaman. Whatever, look over there. Ordinarily, we're very strict that we don't ask God to perform miracles where the laws of creation, laws of nature would be changed. So what gives me the right here to say, God, do miracles for us? So he quotes the ideas that some people say, he mentions, you'll see later in this piece, he says, yeah, some people say that it's B'lashon Rabbim, it's in plural. Okay. He says, here's how I would answer it. Here's how I would answer it. Many of our early commentators on the Gemara write, in the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, the Gemara tells us, B'Nisan Nigalu. Chazal tell us that our ancestors were originally redeemed from Egypt in the month of Nisan, V'Nisan Asidin Ligoel. Therefore, in the month of Nisan, that's when we are destined to experience the ultimate redemption, meaning the coming of Mashiach. What does that mean? The Kivan Shekvar Nasu Nisan B'Chodesh Hazeh. What Chazal meant is that since great miracles of redemption originally occurred in the month of Nisan, the template was set. God changed the very essence of the month of Nisan. In other words, redemption is very difficult. Redemption involves a lot of miracles. But God already made redemption in the DNA of Nisan. When he stamped the template of Nisan, the first redemption that Bnei Yisrael had experienced in such an extraordinary fashion was the exodus from Egypt. That changed the whole nature of Nisan. So since the nature of Nisan has been changed to allow for redemption, that's the easiest month for the ultimate redemption to occur in the future with the coming of Mashiach. He says, Dugma, what's an example? Lamayim shenispashlu v'nitztanu. Let's add a pot of water, some fluid, that I already boiled it up. It was at a rolling boil, v'nitztanu, and then I let it cool off. I took it off the fire and I let it cool off. Yoser b'nakol l'chammeim, that pot of water will boil up much quicker mimayim shalom nispashlu od klal. It'll boil much quicker than water that never was boiled in the first place. Why? Since its nature it's already been brought to a boil once. Let's add that soup was already brought to a boil once. Even though it's cooled off, it's room temperature again now. Since it had been boiled up once, he's saying it'll boil up quicker than something that had never been boiled in the first place. He says, Uperashi Makam Acher, he says, and this is, I explained this elsewhere. He goes, this is also behind this idea, Megaglun's Chus ideas. Okay, that's for another discussion. Next, on the last words analyzed, according to this, now it all makes sense. B'Chanukah Purim, during the festivals of Chanukah and Purim, God made incredible miracles happen at that specific point on the Jewish calendar. Therefore, he changed the nature of that month, of that period of the time of the year. Therefore, every year when that rolls around, when that part of the calendar rolls around again, yesh be'elu yamim beteva lasos nisim. It's now in the nature of that section of the Jewish calendar. That is the time of the year where miracles can occur. God made it. This is the time for miracles. The same way we say about Nisan, the month of Nisan, since the redemption already occurred, God made it that the template of Nisan is one which allows for redemption. So too, the end of Kislev, when Chanukah is the beginning of Teves, that's Chanukah. That's where we are now. It's part of the DNA of that month on the Jewish calendar that's when miracles occur. That's when they could happen. It's not against the laws of nature. That's now part of nature of this period of the year. That's why Omrim Shiyasalonu Nisim. That's why we could say such a harachman. The rest of the year would be chutzpah to say such a harachman. But now it makes sense to say such a harachman. That God, you did miracles for our ancestors at this time of the year in the past. Do it again now. Uvizman hazeh shekvar hayomim hema beteva muchanim laasiyas nisim. It is now in the Teva, it is now part of the nature of these months, of this time of the calendar, for miracles to occur. So since it's part of the calendar, this is a time we can daven for miracles. That is what Rav Zilberstein, I'm going back to the bottom of, back to the top of page 4, that Rav Zilberstein ended by saying, Rav Zilberstein concluded his words by saying, we should take advantage of this time, since it's a time of Nisim, and many Nisim can happen. Chanukah is a time of miracles, and it's explained in the poskim that during Chanukah, it's permitted to daven for open miracles. Why? Because this is the time. God made it. This is part of the nature of Kislev and Teves. Miracles happen now. It's not against the laws of nature. I'm not asking God to change the laws of nature. He already did that. He made it part and parcel of Kislev and Teves that miracles occur during this time. So it's okay to daven for miracles. Just like our ancestors were Zocha, they merited to see Nisim and to have miracles in those days. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God can perform Nisim and wonders for us during these days. And that's what we're all davening for. And we shouldn't be bashful about it. We should have the chutzpah to ask Hashem for Nisim, for miracles during these days, because we need them so much right now. We all know how much we need them. All of us have loved ones, we have friends, we have family, we have people we care about who are in Israel, who are living in harm's ways. We all know people who are in harm's ways, Chayalim, brave Chayalim. We may not know personally, but the Jewish world is so connected. We know people who still have family members who are being held hostage. We need miracles, and we could daven for miracles at this point. This is a time of the year where there's nothing wrong with asking for miracles, because it's a time of miracles. And we daven, our collective tefillah is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be matir asurim. He should free those who are captured, those who are in captivity, and he should look after those who are in harmed ways. He should allow our soldiers to succeed in all that they have to accomplish and to return safely to their families soon. Those who are being held in darkness should be brought out into light and returned to their families in good health as soon as possible. And all of Am Yisrael, all the Jewish people, should live in true peace and safety. And that's something which could really only occur with the arrival of the true Geula, of the full redemption. So we pray and we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu during this time of Nisim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should perform more Nisim, and don't sell us short, no minor miracles. We want full-blown miracles, because it's a time where we could ask for them. We want the full Geula, we want the full redemption, because with that full redemption, all of the tsaros, all the troubles and travails that Am Yisrael faces will come to an end. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring that geula. May He bring that full redemption and make those miracles. Harachamanu Yaseh Lanu. God should make miracles. Yaseh Nisim Lanu should perform miracles for us, just like He made miracles for our ancestors at this time of the year. And we should see that very, very soon. I want to wish everyone a Chanukah Sameach, a Freilich and Chanukah. It should be a time where our prayers are answered and miracles, full-blown miracles are experienced by Am Yisrael once again. I'm going to